The look on Meredith Kern's face when her son fired Daniel York was something I won't forget. Tight-lipped, nostrils flared, the kind of quiet rage that doesn't explode, just curdles in silence. She didn't say a word that day, just stood there in her silk blouse and pearls, watching as Austin, slick-haired and smug in his dad's old chair, told Daniel, "We don't pay slackers around here." Daniel didn't flinch. He simply set down his badge like he was folding a napkin and walked out of the boardroom. No one said goodbye. I think most of us were too stunned or too scared. That was Monday. By Thursday, we'd learned just how badly Austin screwed up. I've worked at Halcyon for 13 years, long enough to remember when Meredith's late husband, Robert Kern, still walked the halls with a busted shoulder from his Navy days and a smile that said, "Get it done right the first time." Daniel York was his right hand, maybe not in title, but in trust. If Robert was the voice, Daniel was the silence that kept everything steady. Director of Operational Compliance. It sounded boring. It wasn't. That man knew where every skeleton, contract, and quietly buried clause lived. And Austin? Austin couldn't even find the HR password spreadsheet without texting me. I should mention real quick. If you've gotten even this far into the story, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. I know, everyone says that. But seriously, it keeps our stories going, and 97% of folks never subscribe. So if you're enjoying this, do the team a favor. Thanks. Now, back to Daniel. He never raised his voice. Not once. Not even when that VP from procurement tried to pin a 3-month shipping error on him in front of the entire Q4 audit committee. He just waited for her to finish, opened his folder, and handed out a printed email thread that shut the room up cold. That's how Daniel worked. Precise, methodical, impossible to trap. Which is exactly why what Austin did shocked everyone, especially me. Austin inherited the title, not the sense. He walked into the CEO role like it came with bottle service and a Spotify playlist. First week in, he changed the mission statement to something he called Lean Forward Synergy, which meant absolutely nothing, and then spent $64,000 on branded hoodies and beanbag chairs for the break room. Daniel? He said nothing. Just quietly updated a few templates in the compliance archive and cleared his Thursday lunch like he knew something was coming. I watched him that week. He moved slower than usual, looked over the horizon more. I caught him standing by the window once during a meeting about system redundancies, staring out at the parking lot with his hands folded like a priest. When the firing came, it wasn't personal. At least not for Danielle. It was clinical. Austin came in with 2 HR reps, both barely older than his haircut, and read from a script like he was on Shark Tank. Your role has become redundant. We're moving toward more agile, performance-based leadership. Unfortunately, that means your services are no longer required. Daniel blinked once. Is this termination without cause? Austin scoffed. Didn't even look up from the iPad. Sure, call it whatever you want, but I need your badge. And that's all Daniel needed to hear. He slid it across the table, stood up, nodded once at me, just once, and left. No explosion, no threats, not even a raised eyebrow. But I knew something had shifted. I don't know how I knew. Maybe it was the stillness he left behind. Maybe it was the pause Austin had when Daniel asked that question. Or maybe it was the way Meredith slowly sat down after Daniel left, eyes fixed on nothing, her fingers tapping her gold ring like Morse code. The office felt colder after that. Not just in mood, I mean physically cold. Someone said it was because Daniel used to adjust the HVAC manually. No one knew how to change it back. The smart thermostat defaulted to 64. Austin strutted around like a rooster after that, kept calling himself CEO 2.0, said we were entering a new era of operational redefinition. And to be fair, he was right about one thing. Everything was about to be redefined, just not the way he thought. You could feel the shift the moment Austin parked his matte black Tesla in the founder's spot. Didn't even have the decency to swap out the plaque. Just slapped a sticker over his father's name that read, "Reserved for the future." The kind of tech bro smugness that makes your skin itch. Within days, the atrium plants were replaced with digital screens flashing startup slogans like "Fail fast," "Scale faster," and "Legacy is a liability." Real forehead vein poppers for folks who'd been here since dial-up. First thing he did? Axed Sandy from accounting. 40 years. She survived 3 restructures, 2 divorces, and 1 mild heart attack during a budget freeze. Austin handed her a severance packet like he was giving her a fidget spinner, said something about refreshing the financial talent stack. 2 days later, his roommate from Stanford was introduced as our new chief of financial strategy. Kid wore Yeezys to the board meeting and kept asking me how to print that one thing. By the end of the week, the place didn't feel like Halcyon anymore. It felt like someone's group project gone feral. Compliance protocols? Slashed in half. Cross-departmental reviews? Gone. The internal audit trail Daniel spent 2 decades refining was now too friction-heavy for modern agility. I watched as Austin gleefully dismantled every safeguard like a kid pulling legs off an insect. Every time someone raised a concern, he'd brush it off with the same smug line. "You're thinking like a boomer, not a builder." Then came the all-hands. They made us gather in the newly rebranded Vision Studio, which in normal human terms used to be the damn cafeteria. Austin walked in late, of course. Microphone in hand, hoodie under blazer, like he was pitching on TechCrunch. Behind him, a PowerPoint titled Legacy Waste, identifying operational parasites. He started with the usual startup sermon: velocity, disruption, market fit. But then he went in for the kill. Some people in this company are here to move us forward. Others are just relics. Paper pushers, people whose jobs only exist because no one's had the guts to ask if they're still necessary. We're changing that. That's when he looked at Daniel, locked eyes across the room, like he was daring him to speak. Daniel didn't blink, didn't flinch, just nodded once, like a man who hears a gun cock but already knows the shooter's hands are slippery. The air in that room could have cracked tile. I don't even remember the rest of the meeting, just the silence after. Nobody spoke. Not even the new VP of Culture Integration, who'd been clapping like a wind-up toy 10 minutes earlier. Later that day, I passed Daniel's office and caught a glimpse through the half-open door. He wasn't packing, wasn't pacing. He was just sitting there with a copy of his contract spread out on the desk, a yellow legal pad beside it, and one sticky note marking a clause, 17G. That's when I realized something. Daniel hadn't just taken the founder's trust. He'd helped write the rules. Clause 17G, I'd heard whispers, buried in legacy contracts from the founder's era during the estate freeze before Robert Kern's diagnosis. A self-defense mechanism, triggered automatically if certain conditions were met during a termination without cause, but no one had seen it used. We thought it was a myth. Until Daniel picked up his phone and made one call. No emotion, no commentary, just this. Activate clause 17G full invocation, timestamp 4:41 p.m. Then he hung up. I backed away from the door before he could see me, my heart thumping like I'd witnessed a spell being cast, because that's what it felt like. Not a reaction, a pre-written prophecy coming to life. Austin thought he was gutting a dinosaur. He was actually waking a dragon. Monday morning started quiet. Too quiet. Most of us knew something was coming. The whole office had been twitchy ever since Daniel started wearing his wedding ring again. A little detail, sure, but if you knew Danielle, you knew that ring came out when things were about to get serious. His wife passed 10 years ago, and he hadn't worn it since. I noticed it on his hand during the Thursday meeting, glinting under the LED lights while Austin droned on about synergy. That, and the black notebook. Not his usual leather one. This one was hard-bound, thick, with tabs marked in red. At 9:07 a.m., Daniel's name popped up on the conference room display. Meeting with CEO plus HR, room 6B. No subject, no duration. Just summoned like a house cat to a vet exam. He walked past my desk with the same calm he always had. One hand in his pocket, the other holding that thick notebook. No briefcase, no coffee. Just the kind of focus you see on bomb techs and surgeons. Inside the room, Austin, HR's director Hannah, and one of her interns. Some kid in a blazer that still had the tag on it. The vibe was off immediately. Austin didn't even stand when Daniel entered, just swiveled slowly in his chair like a Bond villain knockoff, wearing that smug little smirk like he just got away with something clever. "Daniel," he began, "thanks for coming in. This'll be quick." Daniel nodded, no seat taken, just stood. Austin leaned back, his voice oozing rehearsed faux casualness. We've reviewed your department metrics, and frankly, we've noticed some concerning patterns: operational drag, resistance to restructuring, and frankly, a lack of visible output. It's giving slack risk. Daniel raised one eyebrow. Slack risk? Austin grinned. Yeah, people who coast under the radar accumulate control without transparency and slow down the evolution of the org. You've had a good run, but this company's moving forward. There was a beat, just silence. The intern looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Hannah adjusted her glasses but didn't speak. Then Daniel asked the question, calm even, already knowing the answer. Is this termination without cause? Austin scoffed. Sure, call it whatever you want. Bottom line, we need people aligned with the vision, not legacy overhead. Daniel didn't speak, didn't blink, just opened his notebook, checked something on the second page, and closed it. Then, and this is what I'll remember until the day I retire, he reached into his inside jacket pocket, pulled out his badge, and set it on the table like he was paying a dinner bill. A final gesture, deliberate, clean, no anger, no speech, not even a raised voice. He looked at Hannah once, briefly. She looked down. Then he turned, walked out of the room, and didn't look back. We watched from our desks like hostages watching a guard walk past the gate. The silence that followed was sharp, suffocating. Austin strutted out 2 minutes later like he'd just won a bet, clapping the intern on the back and calling him bro, said something about starting fresh. Then vanished into his glass office and cranked up a playlist called Dominate Mode. Yes, seriously. Daniel didn't stop at his desk, didn't pack, just left the building with nothing but that notebook in hand. But here's the thing. When someone like Daniel leaves like that with nothing, you realize it wasn't surrender. It was ignition. And somewhere in the back of my head, I started counting. Days, hours. Because that badge drop? That wasn't resignation. That was a trigger. Daniel's house was the kind of place you'd never notice from the street, unassuming, brick-faced, with a fading wind chime that barely moved unless the storm really pushed. That afternoon, while most of us sat frozen in the aftershock of his firing, Daniel brewed a single cup of black coffee, set it down next to a laptop that hadn't seen daylight in 3 years, and opened an encrypted document labeled Contingency York Vi 5. It took him exactly 7 minutes to locate the line he needed. Clause 17G, buried in a legacy contract template Daniel had helped draft years ago, back when Halcyon's founder was preparing the estate transition, and wanted to make sure no one, not even his own blood, could burn the place down unchecked. Daniel had written it after watching another compliance lead at a partner firm get canned without cause and have no recourse. He drafted it for others. Never thought he'd use it himself. Until now. He typed the message with surgical precision. Subject. Activation. Clause 17G body. Per conditions met under subsection A and C. Clause 17G is formally triggered. Please initiate audit procedures within the required timeline. All communication to go through secure relay. I will remain offline until contact from Brentwick and Loam is confirmed. He hit send. And then, nothing. No angry posts, no farewell email, no thank you for the memories LinkedIn update, just silence. The kind that hums under your skin when you know a storm's been set loose somewhere just out of sight. Back at the office, Austin was riding high. He'd changed his Slack status to Vision in Flight and scheduled a mandatory all-team brainstorming session titled The Dinosaur is Dead. What's next? Someone even said he high-fived the new VP of Strategic Growth while bragging. You see how fast I clipped that dead branch? He called Daniel a relic 3 times that day, said things like legacy rot and paperweight culture while sipping green juice and showing off the marketing deck for Halcyon's upcoming rebrand. Nobody stopped him. Hell, most of us didn't even speak. We just watched. Quiet. Uneasy. Like passengers on a plane whose wings you suddenly suspect weren't bolted right. I texted Daniel that evening. Just one word. You okay? No response. I tried again the next morning. Nothing. His number went straight to voicemail, but then, quietly, we began to notice strange little things. Audit logs in the internal server were locked behind a new layer of encryption. Finance files that used to be editable were now view-only with no metadata trail. Someone in payroll mentioned that the back-end backup requests had doubled, but no one could track who triggered them. Austin, Oblivious, spent the rest of the week parading around like he'd won a talent show. He introduced another frat buddy as our new Agility Operations Officer, a role he made up on the spot, and told HR to sunset unnecessary compliance reviews, said it was time to let go of old thinking and institutional paranoia. Meanwhile, Hannah from HR kept glancing at her email like it might bite her. That Friday afternoon, just as the office started thinning out for the weekend, she stepped into the copy room and shut the door. I saw her through the window, hand trembling slightly, phone to her ear, eyes locked on something glowing on her screen. I didn't hear what she said, but her expression told me everything. Someone had just knocked, gently but firmly, on the front door of Halcyon Analytics' very foundation, and that someone wasn't coming to ask questions. They were coming to read every answer already written. Meredith Kern always answered unknown numbers, old habit from her husband's days running the company. You never know which call is the iceberg, he used to say. So when her phone rang at 6:12 a.m. and the screen read blocked, she picked up without hesitation. Mrs. Kern, came the clipped British accent on the other end. This is Alistair Vaughan, senior partner with Brentwick and Loam. We're contacting you pursuant to Clause 17G, which has been activated following the termination of Daniel York from Halcyon Analytics. Silence. Not a gasp. Not a single word. Just Meredith sitting at the breakfast nook, her spoon halfway to her grapefruit, eyes now locked on the steam curling off her tea. Clause 17G, she repeated softly, like it was a ghost she'd forgotten was still buried in the floorboards. Yes, ma'am. Mr. York listed you as the primary point of escalation should his contractual protections be breached. Our team has initiated phase 1 of the audit process and will require full cooperation from your internal finance, procurement, and compliance teams. Does Austin know you're calling me? There was a pause, a respectful one. No, he will be informed after we secure all initial documents and server logs, for security purposes. She didn't blink. I'll convene the board, she said flatly, and hung up. By 8:03 a.m., Meredith was seated at the head of the executive conference room, flanked by 7 other board members, all of them handpicked by her late husband over the years. Half of them hadn't been inside the office in a month. A few were still nursing coffee and jet lag, but they were there, because when Meredith Kern called an emergency session without the CEO, you showed up. She didn't speak right away, just slid her iPad across the table until it stopped in front of board chair Leonard Grayson. He read the email, his jaw set like stone. This is real? Meredith nodded. Clause 17G was Daniel's idea. He wrote it to protect this company from exactly this kind of stupidity. Grayson leaned back, exhaled through his nose. He did warn us about Austin's spending. Another member, Agnes from Compliance Oversight, looked up sharply. Wait, I thought Austin was just consolidating. The consultants were signed off, weren't they? No, Meredith said. They were rubber-stamped, with no audit trail. That's when Brentwick and Loam walked in, 3 of them, all in suits without ties, carrying laptops that didn't match their business cards. They didn't bother with pleasantries. They started with a simple breakdown. Over $3.2 million in consultant payments over the past 5 months. The names on the invoices? Fake. Or worse, real, but attached to shell firms that linked back to Austin's fraternity brothers' holding company in Delaware. Procurement logs had gaps wide enough to drive a freight truck through. Wire transfers labeled as vendor diversity accelerators, sent to accounts that hadn't existed 6 months ago. It was sloppy. Insultingly so. The worst part? One of the flagged payments had been made from a contingency account that required dual approval, a system Daniel had installed, and that had been forcibly overridden 2 weeks after he left. Meredith sat with her hands folded in her lap, eyes closed, not out of exhaustion, out of calculation. Austin can't be in this meeting, she said, not until phase 2. Grayson agreed. He's compromised. He won't know a damn thing until the report's already on our desks. The room nodded, and so it began. While Austin paraded around the second floor giving interviews to Fast Company and updating his Instagram bio to reshaping legacy into velocity, a silent war room 2 stories down was dissecting every dollar he'd spent. At one point during the audit, a junior analyst found a memo drafted by Daniel 3 years ago, flagging a potential risk if founder-level control was handed to an untested beneficiary lacking financial discipline. The memo had been ignored, archived, but now it was stapled to the front of the internal findings summary. Daniel wasn't just covering his own exit. He'd been preparing for this exact unraveling in silence for years. And somewhere, wherever he was, probably sipping black coffee with that same unreadable stare, he knew it had begun. He wasn't the target anymore. He was the knife in the dark sliding through the soft belly of arrogance without a sound. The door didn't just open, it slammed, hard enough to rattle the framed certificate of incorporation on the wall. Austin stormed in like a frat boy who just found out someone else drank his last energy drink, red-faced and wild-eyed, flanked by two junior executives who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else, including under a moving bus. "What the hell is this?" he barked, gesturing to the Brentwick and Loam team hunched over laptops, their screens displaying rows of flagged transactions, encrypted archives, and one blinking warning tied to a federal contract. Non-compliant. Holding status pending. No one looked up, not even Alistair Vaughn, who simply kept typing, his fingers moving like clockwork as if Austin's presence were a leaf fluttering through a hurricane. Austin whipped toward the head of the table. "Mom, what the hell is going on? Why wasn't I informed of this audit? Who gave them access to financial systems without CEO clearance?" Meredith didn't flinch, didn't raise her voice. She simply picked up a single sheet of paper, Daniel's original signed contract, and slid it across the mahogany table like a chess move she'd been waiting years to make. "This is Clause 17G, she said coolly. "Did you not read his contract?" Austin looked down, blinked. "That's from like 20 years ago. This can't still be active." "It's active," Grayson snapped, "because you terminated him without cause, which means, per legal counsel, this audit is not only authorized, it's mandatory. And let me tell you, it's already revealed enough to make your hoodie spin." For a second, Austin just stood there, open mouth, closed fists, the look of someone who finally realizes the adult table isn't playing pretend. Alistair cleared his throat gently, which somehow commanded more authority than Austin's shouting. "We've discovered a series of material misstatements in your Q2 procurement ledger, as well as duplicative consultant fees disguised as DEI initiatives. More critically, however, your office appears to have submitted a signed federal renewal packet using outdated system certification, which expired 11 days prior to filing. That places your DCAA compliance at risk of full suspension pending federal review." Austin blinked. "I didn't submit anything. That was the systems team." "No," Meredith cut in sharply, her voice like glass over gravel. "That was you. You insisted on skipping the compliance review because it was a formality. You told Daniel he was paranoid for pushing back. Do you remember that?" Austin opened his mouth, but Grayson wasn't finished. "You fired the man who wrote our internal compliance protocol, who maintained every license renewal checklist by hand, who was the reason our last 3 federal contracts cleared without a single red flag. You fired him, mocked him, and now you're trying to pretend like you didn't light the match." "Gentlemen," Alistair added calmly, "our team will now proceed to Phase 3 of the audit. Full forensic review of all digital communication tied to executive-level directives. That includes Slack logs, deleted emails, and VoIP metadata. Your office is now considered under containment protocol. Will require your keycard and device access." "What?" Austin's voice cracked. "You can't just—" "We can," Meredith said coldly, "because you're suspended pending the outcome of this audit, effective immediately." And just like that, Austin Kern, self-anointed CEO, disruptor of legacy rot, and destroyer of decades-long institutional trust, was reduced to a shell. His mouth moved, but no words came. His hands hovered near his phone like it was a shield, but there was no one left to call. He stared around the room, maybe expecting someone to defend him. No one moved. Not the board. Not Meredith. Not even the junior execs who were already backing out of the room like they'd wandered into a funeral. One of the Brentwick analysts stepped forward quietly. "Mr. Kern, this way, please." And just like that, The storm he thought he controlled picked him up by the collar and threw him out of the only room that still had any power. As the door clicked shut behind him, a silence fell across the table. Not shock, not sorrow, just cold, collective rage, the kind that doesn't scream but calculates. Because the damage wasn't just financial, it was reputational, systemic, and federal. Daniel York hadn't even set foot in the building, and still, he'd dismantled the entire regime, not with fire, not with noise, just with one clause, and the patience to wait for someone dumb enough to trip it. The Monday after Austin's suspension, Halcyon's hallways felt like the air had finally been let back in. You could breathe again, though the silence wasn't peace, it was anticipation. No more thundering playlist from the executive office, no more pointless innovation meetings where we pretended we understood what hyper-vertical synergy pods even meant. Just the quiet shuffle of papers and the low murmur of people realizing they still had jobs. For now. At exactly 10 a.m., a black Lincoln pulled up to the side lot, the one no one used unless your name used to be on the building. The door opened. Daniel stepped out. No briefcase, no fanfare, just the same navy sport coat, the same polished shoes, and that same unreadable look like he could spot a lie before it even left your throat. He walked through the front doors without swiping a badge. Meredith met him in the atrium, handed him a temporary ID, and said only this: "Consultant, full access, close it down." That was it. No announcement, no press release, but everyone knew. The man they'd fired without cause was back, and this time, the gloves weren't just off. They'd never existed. Daniel set up shop in Conference Room 3C, the one with no windows and thick carpet that made every step feel hushed. Within hours, the forensic team from Brentwick and Loam had rerouted their audit servers to mirror off his machine. I watched as Daniel unpacked a single object from his bag, a red external drive labeled Halcyon R Backbone 2007 R 2023. That drive was the ghost Austin never knew existed. Inside it, 2 decades of audit logs, contract drafts, system redundancies, access protocols, and vendor metadata, every overlooked breadcrumb that painted the full picture. While Austin had been busy rewriting mission statements, Daniel had been quietly documenting every single deviation from protocol. Not because he expected betrayal, but because he understood one thing no disruptor ever does. Chaos isn't a bug in the system. It is the system when no one's watching. The real blow came Wednesday. Buried in a 2019 procurement folder, Daniel flagged a chain of unusually timed transfers. Consultant payments routed through a non-profit incubator account that, on paper, supported minority-owned vendor development. In reality, it was a shell. Owned by a man named Troy Kemper, Austin's fraternity brother and former startup co-founder. The pattern was clear. Inflate service costs, route payments to the shell firm, then cycle funds back through a venture entity partially controlled by Austin under a fake advisory role. Classic laundering, only wrapped in the language of social good. Daniel didn't announce it. He just compiled the logs, mapped the transactions, included copies of Austin's Slack messages praising Troy's hustle, and forwarded it all to Meredith with one line: "Fraud pathways confirmed. Recommend external disclosure." Later that afternoon, Meredith called a second board session, this one quieter, smaller, just her, Grayson, and Daniel. I wasn't in the room, but word spread fast. Daniel refused a formal reinstatement, said he didn't want the title. Didn't need the office. All he asked for was contractual consulting authority, 6-month term, and discretion to finalize system stabilization without interference. Meredith agreed. Grayson offered to add a bonus clause. Daniel declined. "Closure's enough," he reportedly said. By the next morning, Consultant D. York was listed on the internal contact directory, and half the departments that used to ignore compliance requests were suddenly emailing time-stamped apologies. I passed by Conference Room 3C later that week. Daniel's light was still on at 7:43 p.m. He was hunched over his screen, headphones in, red pen tapping a printed ledger. Not gloating, not victorious, just working. That's how he won. Not with press conferences, not with dramatic speeches. He returned like a shadow filling its own shape, quiet, calm, inevitable. And this time, he wasn't here to comply. He was here to finish the job. The chair sat empty for 3 days before the plaque was quietly removed. No press, no memo, no grand announcement. Just a maintenance worker with a screwdriver and a brown envelope labeled Kern, Hold. They say Meredith had the nameplate boxed up and sent to storage, not the trash. A subtle gesture that said, "We don't erase our mistakes, we archive them." The official line was, "Suspension pending further review." But everyone knew what that meant. Austin's badge was disabled, his calendar scrubbed, and his fancy espresso machine hauled out of the executive suite like a scene from a divorce settlement. What came next wasn't loud. It was meticulous. Meredith called a town hall. No camera crew, no branded backdrops, just folding chairs in the atrium, employees holding coffee like shields, and that eerie hush of people unsure whether to hope or brace. She stepped up to the mic in a navy blazer, no jewelry except her wedding ring, and began with words that sounded less like leadership and more like a reckoning. Halcyon was built by people who understood that legacy isn't just what you inherit, it's what you choose to preserve. We don't honor it by gutting it. We protect it, we learn from it, and we evolve without discarding the scaffolding that held us up. You could have heard a stapler drop. Her eyes scanned the crowd and landed just briefly on the back row where Daniel stood. No badge, no blazer, just his quiet self, nodding once. She continued. Effective immediately, we are entering a stabilization phase. Daniel York will serve as internal compliance advisor through the remainder of the audit. He will not be assuming a public-facing executive role at his own request. His focus will be reestablishing the operational backbone this company nearly lost. The room didn't cheer. It didn't need to. The silence itself was agreement. In the weeks that followed, Daniel moved like a ghost through the halls, not to haunt, but to heal. He dismantled the patchwork automation Austin had jammed into place and restored the original compliance checkpoints with surgical calm. He flagged accounts that needed scrutiny, cleared those that didn't, and set up new redundancies to make sure the company could survive the next storm, even if he wasn't around to steer it. He also submitted one final memo to the board, a recommendation to elevate Lena from internal audit to director of compliance. She'd worked under him for 6 years, had his trust, and more importantly, had watched the entire chaos unfold without flinching. The board approved her unanimously. Daniel's only request was that she remove his archived access once the transition was done. "I don't want to linger," he told Meredith over coffee on the third-floor balcony, where the founder used to sit and read the Wall Street Journal. "I came back to steady the bones, not to reattach myself." She nodded. "You never needed the title anyway." "No," he said, eyes fixed on the city below. "Just the truth to land where it belongs." And it had. Austin's mess wasn't gone. The audit was still ongoing, and the whispers of federal review hadn't gone quiet. But the panic had passed. Systems were back online. Clients who'd threatened to walk were now scheduling new contracts. The board was stabilizing. Daniel walked the halls one last time late that Friday. No send-off, no cake. Just a quiet exit through the same glass doors he'd once left with a badge on the table. But this time, he wasn't being pushed out. He was closing the door from the outside, on his own terms, with his head high and no desire for applause. Sometimes, respect doesn't come with power. Sometimes it comes after you've had every reason to burn the place down, and instead, you rebuild it better than they deserved. The sea air in Monterey carried that kind of soft chill that clears your thoughts without asking permission. Daniel sat at the corner table of a small cafe off Lighthouse Avenue, his laptop open beside a single espresso and a spiral notebook filled with notes no one else would ever read. The television over the bar was muted, but the closed captions told the story well enough. Meredith stood at the center of a modest press conference. No branded backdrops, no executive entourage. Just her, a microphone, and a room of reporters who finally understood they'd underestimated what compliance actually meant. "And as part of our recovery framework," she said calmly, "we've reinstated multiple legacy controls, including a renewed version of Clause 17G, expanded to executive and mid-tier contracts effective this quarter." A few raised eyebrows, some murmurs. Then one young reporter, maybe 24, leaned in and asked the question none of the older ones dared. Why keep that clause? Isn't it risky to give that much power to someone who might weaponize it again? Meredith didn't blink. We've learned to read the fine print, she said. And more importantly, we've learned to ask who writes it. Daniel didn't smile. He simply closed the laptop. No celebration, no satisfaction. Just that deep internal click when something ends exactly the way it was supposed to. On the screen, before it shut off, was a draft of a new document. Nothing flashy, just a clean .docs file labeled Clause 21 Estate Reversion. Draft. He wasn't done. Not in the paranoid way, not revenge, just preparation. The kind that comes when you've been through fire and refuse to let anyone else light the match again. The cafe buzzed softly around him. No one knew who he was. Just another quiet man in a quiet town with ocean salt in the air and a cup that had long since gone cold. He stood, slid the chair in with the same deliberate ease he'd used to place his badge on the table that day, and tucked the notebook under his arm. As he walked out, the only trace left behind was a receipt with no tip line, just a handwritten note in the corner for the barista. Control isn't loud, it's consistent. And that was Daniel York. No speeches, no parades, just a clause and a clock. And the knowledge that the next time someone tries to erase a legacy, they'd better bring more than a smirk and a title. Because the last man standing isn't always the one who shouts the loudest. Sometimes he's just the one who read every line and never missed a comma. They fired me without cause. I replied without speaking, just a clause and a clock.